All right, so a year ago, I met David at DuPont, and it was a fascinating presentation. So we invited you back because you look like you can help us with risk a lot. David is the founder and CEO of Precoil, an innovation consulting firm that helps leaders make better decisions when the outcomes are uncertain. He's the co-author of Testing Business Ideas, an internationally best-selling book translated into more than 20 languages, and his work has been featured in Harvard Business Review. He created the Precoil EMT system, Extract, Map, Test, a decision readiness standard that helps organizations surface hidden risk, separate signals from noise, and make clear evidence-backed decisions. This work has generated millions of dollars in new growth for DuPont and has been nominated for an industry award. His other clients include Adobe, Bayer, GE, HP, IBM, Mazda, Toyota, and Walmart. So most B2B organizations manage risk after the fact through controls, compliance, reviews, postmortems. Far fewer design risk directly into how decisions are made. In this talk, David's going to introduce decision infrastructure for making certain uncertainty visible. Rather than debating opinions in conference rooms, leaders learn how to extract the assumptions driving the growth initiative, map where the exposure sits, and design targeted tests to reduce exposure early. Drawing on case studies is going to show us how we can turn strategic ambiguity into explicit testable assumptions, align our teams, increase decision speed, and build internal systems that surface exposure before it becomes expensive. You're going to love this. So come on up, David.
I need some clicker help, maybe. The add our tech issues. Yes, I'm David.
Is it on?
One of you change how to speak.
All right, thanks. So yeah, I'm David. I met a lot of you the last couple of days, and I'm relatively new to ISBM. I keynoted last May at Lincoln, DuPont's experimental station. Yeah, I have a winding career journey, as many of us do. I started in startups, and then I made the switch to coaching and consulting companies in Silicon Valley around 2011. And since then, I've coached hundreds of teams and work with mostly large businesses. I still do some startup work. I'll share a fun startup story before I jump in today. But I help companies with risk. I help them make better growth bets. I help them avoid waste, opportunity costs plus wasted spend on things that are not going to return your investment in the market. Our Testing Business Ideas book crossed 100,000 copies sold, so I'm very excited by that. It's actually in a lot of universities now, so I've guest lectured at Harvard and Yale and Stanford recently. So it's good to see some of this change. I've been working at this for a while, so it's good to see some of the language change. And I'm just going to share stories with you. I'd like this to be very conversational. So let's, please discuss it. I'd like this to be very conversational. So just yell questions out at me as we go. You're not going to offend me or anything because it's a smaller group, and I'd rather just have a conversation. So yeah, here's some of the more startup-y work I do. So I still work with investors. I do a lot of work with Tim Draper. I've done some work with Singularity, some of the fun stuff there. It's on NASA's Moffett Field, so it's very fun it's like a kid going into NASA and helping with some big ideas that we can test it in small ways. I also work with lots of corporations. I don't necessarily focus on an industry. I would say the last 5 to 7 years, I've been working with a lot more manufacturing companies, but that's not always the case. I work with software companies, B2B, B2C, B2G, software services, and sorts of things. So I want to tell you a story. So I was on a startup reality show. Don't go looking for it. It's not a very good show. Don't be like, oh, I got to see David C. No, don't. Save yourself. It's not. It wasn't a great show. I found that it was on ABC Family. I found that what I do doesn't make exciting, riveting startup reality TV. They're like, what's your value proposition? Who's your customer segment? How many interviews did you do today? What's your evidence of viability? All that stuff. What they wanted to see were people doing survival camps and a lot of drama and infighting. And I was just like, no, just go test with your customers. But out of that, I met a bunch of fascinating entrepreneurs. One was Carly. So Carly came up to me after one of my workshops and she says, look, I have this idea for kitty litter. And in my head, I thought, oh no, like that's a pretty established market, you know, a lot of big players. How are you going to have marketing spend, all that? There were all these things in my head, but I asked like, okay, so what's your value prop? What is going to be unique for your kitty litter? And she said something really fascinating. She said, well, cats, how many of us have cats in the room? Like we have a couple, you know, a few cat owners. So they hide their illnesses really well. So if they're sick, you really don't know your cat is sick. And so she said our litter can tell if your cat is sick. And we're going to deliver it monthly. Obviously, there's going to be a subscription and all that. And I was like, that's kind of interesting, but good luck, you know? So I was shopping for cat litter and we had ran out. And I was looking on the shelf and I was like, this litter sounds familiar. I think she called it Pretty Litter, but I wasn't sure. And I looked it up and they required for $1 billion. A billion with a B. So I get pitched on ideas from startups, but also corporations that I work with all the time. And what I found is you cannot pick the winners. As smart as you think you are, you cannot say, oh, that idea is going to win. Oh, let's not invest in that one. That one's going to win. That one's going to win. It is not possible. And this is why we spread our bets. We invest small pieces instead of really large chunks really early, because as smart as we think we are, we cannot pick winners. So that's going to be some of the theme today that we talked about. Okay, so question for all of you. How many growth bets? So bets you're going to place inside your organization. How many do you have to make to find that one big one that just pays for all the others? It's like a unicorn, okay? How many say 10? You have to make 10 bets. I see a lot of head shaking, wow. Usually people at least raise their hand for 10. Okay, no on 10. How many say 50? You need 50 bets. Let me see a couple hands, okay. What about 250? Lots of hands, okay. What about 500? So you guys are kind of dialed in on this. So it's 250, all right. Maybe a show of hands. How many of you are working on 250 bets in your org right now? Yeah, nobody. I gave this talk once at recently at an investor conference, and I had a startup coming up to me, and they said, "How do we make 250 bets?" And I was like, "I don't want to tell you, but you are one of the 250 bets." So maybe this is not so much for you. So this is what you get. So I'm going to break it down for you. This is based on real data out of Silicon Valley. So out of 175, they're pretty much just write them off. You're not going to see much of all at a return out of 175 out of those 250. Okay? This is some of the hardest work we do inside organizations right now. Trying to create new, sure.
Would you say there's a pre-filter to these 175 already that the experts weighed in, or is this just kind of what's?
Yeah, it's pre-filtered. So you should have some level of like a thesis or some kind of guidance on where you're playing, because if you go way outside of that and you do not have the organizational capability to see that thing to fruition, even if you found something, it's not going to live on. So that is something I've had conversations with people about that over the last couple of days. But yes, you should have some kind of filter. Now, it shouldn't be super aggressive in the sense that you're just so conservative, you're weeding out anything that you think will fail. You're not going to find your next big bet by being very, very conservative. At the same time, if you run library software for the libraries around the world and you want to build a mobile golf app, that's probably outside of your, of your domain. Yes.
When does the starter's pistol go off that it's a project, right?
Yeah. So as soon as it's in the intake process of the commercialization, so usually it's either stage 0 or maybe like a pre-stage, but it's not just something someone's thought of, it's actually you've started putting in the work on it. About 70 of those get a 1x to 3x return. Okay, so a little bit, but nothing ground shaking. And then really, really small percentage you have a chance to get that big, 10x or more returns. So something I see time and time again in the organizations I coach is that we do not place 250 bets. Maybe we place 10, maybe 5, maybe 3. And we expect that we've picked a winner and we're going to work on that and it's going to be a new revenue driver inside our corporation. Yeah. So what I challenge you all today is to rethink this a bit. I know my name's bland, but I have spicy takes. So you're not really funding ideas, you're funding assumptions. I've heard a lot of great things over the last couple of days, people working on new initiatives inside your company. I think we get too attached to the idea. We get too excited about the idea. We fall in love with the idea, we fall in love with the solution. I often run workshops where we have people sketch out new ideas, new business models before lunch. By the time lunchtime hits, they've already fallen in love with it. They're working on their marketing plan. They want this thing to scale. And there's something about us where we want it to succeed. The people around us want it to succeed. But I think we need to temper that excitement a little bit and think more about what are the assumptions that we're making in these ideas. And the good news is there's a way to look at that systematically, which I'll share with you today. So you've probably seen these circles. I saw these in previous workshops even this week. I did not invent these, but I'll walk through them with you and I want to have a little conversation about them. So the way I look at risk is a lot of human-centered design. I have a design background. So I look at desirability, viability, and feasibility. What I found over time is that this language is one of the few kind of framings I've seen stick with C-suite. Okay, I see this and hear this more often. Is it desirable? Is it viable? Is it feasible? So with desirability, it's a lot of do they? Do they have the jobs to be done? Do they have unmet needs? Do they understand our value proposition? It's a lot of risk around the customer. With viability, it's a lot of should we? So it's, can we make a profit? Can we hit our gross margins with this? Is this going to cost too much to do? Is this aligned to where we're going to go? Does this match our thesis? And then feasibility is a lot of the can we. It's a lot of can we do this? Are we organized to do this? I also put regulatory things in here as well. You might be able to do it, but maybe regulations haven't caught up with you or it's against regulations. So I kind of lump in a lot of the regulatory pressures under can we. Now, I didn't personally create this framing. I learned this from IDEO. You trace it back to Stanford D School. You trace it back beyond that to Larry Keeley's work at Doblin Group. I gave a keynote at Kellogg in Chicago, and people raised their hand. They're like, well, I think Keeley got it from a professor. So I actually do not know where the single source of truth is on this. I tried to trace it back from my book, but as far as I could go. But that's what these things persist, and they're kind of adopted by new communities, and they, if they're good, they keep on going, and other people, keep using them. But I use them because they work. No matter what kind of company I'm dealing with, it's do they, should we, can we?
So the real win worth it framework.
So real win worth maps pretty well to this. Yeah, and that I believe was out of a Harvard Business Review article or Wharton, yeah. Okay. So I have seen companies map this to real win worth. Now my question for all of you, where do you think marketing plays in these circles? Which circle resonates the most to you when you think about marketing risk? Do they? Yeah. But I challenge you a little bit. Did any of you look at the green circle and you're like, marketing might impact that too? Kind of should we?
Which one was most important? Yeah, I agree with you. One, two.
Yeah, I early on when I was doing my work, people would always ask me what roles go to what circle. And marketing, usually I would put in desirability, but I also see marketing more often now also contributing to viability. What's your customer acquisition cost going to be? Your marketing spend, you do impact the viability as well. But these three circles tend to hold up, whether I'm working with a company that's as a business model here in space, no matter B2B, B2C, it tends to hold up no matter what organization I go into. Now, there are variations of these circles. If you go out there looking for these circles, you're gonna see stuff from me. You're gonna see stuff from like Marty Kagan and other people. I've noticed some people split desirability out into two circles. They say, is this valuable and usable, which is fine. Or they'll put sustainable as a circle and it's fine. I just try to keep things simple because we have this kind of pattern of overcomplicating things. And I try to keep things as simple as possible to help you meet your goals. So I stick with the three circles. So speaking of that, so we talked about ISBM last May. This is Alexa. You'll notice, if you can squint, you maybe can see it. That's what she's using to describe the strategy at DuPont, right? Do they want it? Is it desirable? Should we do it? Is it viable? Can we do it? Is it feasible? That language I hear more and more. If you look across DuPont and also CUNY, we have some CUNY folks here today. You'll notice like the commercialization processes are weaving those words into stage gates. You know, if you focus really early on only feasibility, and you have the risk of building something and over-investing, but then realizing later maybe we didn't have a big enough market for that, or maybe the switching costs were too high. So a lot of my work is, I'm not really replacing what companies do. It's more of, can we shape what you're doing to address risk sooner so that you don't waste money and launch something that doesn't resonate with the market, right? So how does this work with funding? Well, unfortunately, we still fund things too early. We overfund and we fund towards building. How many of you are working on newer initiatives at your company today, or you know of newer initiatives that are needed? Did any of you start with building right away? Like, oh, let's build a prototype, or let's build a POC, or let's build like. Unfortunately, it's just too easy to start with build because it's easy to manage and track. Have you built these things by this date, with this budget? It's really easy to track the build. But I would argue that is not where your risk is today. You all can build anything. That is not the riskiest assumption, is can you build it? The risk is often in desirability. Do customers want it? Do they have the unmet needs? Do they understand your value proposition? Right? And viability, will they pay enough? Can you keep costs low enough? So when you think of how your funding works inside your company, what I would challenge you to think of is, okay, how many people did we put on this right away? How many of those are engineers? You know, how many of those are people that can go find out the answers we need with customers?
David, is there any of the three circles, is there ever a point of sequencing or prioritization at any given point, or are they all equal valid questions that you try to answer all at the same time?
So I try not to answer them all at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you look at, and I'll go into my work with DuPont a little later, but you know, it's really easy to start with, well, we don't know if we could build this, so let's start there, and let's start in R&D, and let's invest in that. I flipped it. So I said, no, you all can build anything. That is not your risk. Please delay building right now. Let's go answer the customer needs. Let's make sure we understand them. Let's make sure we understand switching costs. So if I had to show, like, I don't have it in this slide deck, but as this goes along for 12 weeks or so, you'll notice that the orange kind of shrinks down a little bit because we're learning more about the customer. And the green gets a little bigger because now the need is real, but will they pay enough? Will they actually switch from what they're doing now? You know, some companies I coach, you know, we've gotten really far along in the process and then realized, oh, it's going to cost them $1 million to switch out our solution on their production line. That would have been nice to know earlier on. And sometimes your customers aren't even thinking that, or your customers might not even know that number early on, and you might have to actually educate them. So it does switch. I would say for priority-wise, I usually start with desirability, then move into viability, and then feasibility last, because you all can build anything. But what I see in practice is we start with feasibility for a long, long time, and then maybe we rush to do a little bit of the other two at the end and try to figure out a business model for it. I'm saying that is not sustainable.
You know,
Yes.
we always used to have a debate, you know, is it real? Can we win? Is it worth it? That, those last two, which one comes first? So is it real, like you say, is desirability, like, is it a real market? And then the question is, can we build it? And then is it worth it once we add our costs?
So I
approach to it, or
usually,
vice versa?
it's not necessarily, you don't have to sequence these exactly of. We
Yeah.
only do desirability, then we only
Yeah,
do viability.
right.
Normally, it's some sort of percentage of each. What I'm arguing for here is that we don't over focus on just building. So normally, it's a little bit of, we're doing mostly desirability and a little bit of viability at the same time. And then we're doing a little less viability, a little less desirability, a lot more viability, maybe a little feasibility then. And then, but it's hard, I know I break these down and kind of split them apart on purpose because I'm trying to unpack the risk. But very rarely am I sequencing and saying,
Yeah.
we only do one theme and then we move on. I don't think that's realistic. And I also think they're so related that it's going to take you probably figuring out the feasibility side to really understand your costs.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that in isolation and get real numbers. Yeah. Got a question?
He's got one down there too.
Wouldn't also depend on where your risks are mainly? Like, are they more in, if you do an assessment, understand your risk, or maybe in the feasibility area? Viability area?
There are rare cases where you're doing something so technically complicated that it does make sense to check here early on. I think in reality, what I see is it's not that case. It's just more we feel comfortable and safe in our R&D labs. It's fun. We get to work on new things. It's kind of a customer-free zone. So unless you're doing something really, really complex from a physics point of view or a compound point of view, I tend to try to defer this as much as possible.
Can I reiterate the importance of what you're saying there?
Sure.
Because it resonates really pretty profoundly with me. I could have mapped the consumer brand packaging goods Venn diagram to that as well, which is around relevance, credibility, and differentiation, as you all know. And that's the world I was raised in. And so before anybody talked about feasibility, because I've worked in all these packaged goods companies, we had to make the business case along those three parameters, right? Could we achieve competitive differentiation? Was this a good idea coming for us? But more important than anything, was it relevant to a customer? And when I left packaged goods and first went into technology and then more into industrial things, we would try to apply that same paradigm, right? And what I found out, because it was what we would used to try to do up front to set expectations around what would be a great product, was now a process used to validate that the idea that had already been determined inside should go outside, right? So the feasibility got in front of the viability, the desirability, which is why, you know, that resonates so well with me, because that's, to me, that's the problem, right? And then the marketing side of it becomes validation that our inside out idea is a good one, right? And then you get all the pressure to like, go tell us why this is desirable.
Yeah, I think if you boil this down, it's a lot of scientific method applied to business. And if you do scientific method well, which I think a lot of us probably know it pretty well in this room. You know, you have a hypothesis, you run your experiments, you know, but what's interesting enough is that I see a lot of, it kind of looks like that from the outside, but you're really just trying to prove what you already wanted to build. and then you're trying to make the numbers look like, just help me go build the thing I want to build. But with packaged goods, so I work with a toothpaste company, and I won't name them, but they released a product in the market that kind of flopped. And so I was brought in to say, okay, how do we come back and reimagine this thing in a different form factor? A lot of the risk wasn't around the value of it. It was more making it viable. And it was also, how do we find our customer acquisition costs? Like, how do we find the people that have tooth sensitivity or teeth pain? And it was really interesting. I have a write-up for it I can show you, but we had to test our way through it to find how do we reach the right kind of people for the relaunch of our product that we're about to do. But so it's not unique just to B2B. I also see this in CPG as well. Sorry, you had a question. And then we had one other.
I think the other thing that layers in here is the innovation has to improve my average profitability of the portfolio. Right? I have to get a sense, only want to innovate things that are gonna improve the overall portfolio, and how do I do that before, getting too fast? I think that's another thing where I need the feasibility to get pulled forward, but maybe just a spot check.
I think. So I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, and you may not know this, but the Silicon Valley loves their innovation labs. They are everywhere. They have rosé on tap. They have rooftop views over the city. They have swing sets inside and bean bags, and it's everything that you would probably watch HBO Silicon Valley and be like, that can't be true. I'm like, this show kind of hits close to home for me. A lot of them have been shut down because what they created was not connected to the core business. So for every awesome YouTube video that you can see about the lab and people building things and this really cool environment, a lot of those don't exist today because they weren't connected to the core business. There was no place inside the core business for that to go out of the lab. So what I'm seeing as a trend now is less innovation labs, but more about how do we build this into how we work and how do we help this de-risk what we're working on? Because I still see companies waste millions of dollars on things that completely flop in the market.
Again, another mention I would have is organization. Language, process, and organization. If the marketing department is off just doing feasibility, but they're not linked, or desirability. They're not linked together with the people who are going to check the feasibility. A lot of from what I've seen anyway, a lot of good stuff happens in dialogue, but sometimes the organizational silos prevent it. Like the people who are thinking about feasibility said, so if we could do this, it looks like it would be a lot more desirable. Can we do this? So that dialogue. So how do you see this working best organizationally?
So it's airing more towards cross-function.
Yeah, sure. So
And so we call it 2 in a box, 3 in a box. Walmart has 4 in a box, however many in a box. But it is people that can represent each of those themes, those circles, working together. So we had some great conversations yesterday about risk and how risk is very personal. And I agree. But as a company, you still have to work through that risk together. So somebody in marketing might say, oh, the market's not there. But product might say, well, it's cost too much, and feasibility back in engineering might say, oh, this isn't possible. You need those folks talking together. So when someone says, I think this is the riskiest, and someone else says, no, this is, you need to have that conversation. I don't think there's a substitute. There's not a handoff here because so much context is lost in the handoffs.
I'm talking about I'm looking at this desirability. What about questions that could come up in a meeting like that? What about if we could do this? So, well, I didn't think you could do that. Why did you make that assumption? Well, I don't know. Can we do that? Well, we could. And then that dialogue has resulted in some interesting outcomes.
Yeah. So I just want to connect it to funding because I don't want this to feel like an extra process you have to do or something it feels like theater. I have like an adverse reaction to that kind of work inside companies. It's if you don't tie this to funding, it's not going to have the meaningful outcome that you're looking for. So the way I approach this, it's called EMT, extract, map, test. I kind of keep things at a principle level. I don't try to subscribe to any real tool sets. I'm at the stage in my career where I've seen enough. What works for GE is not going to work for Adobe, right? So we try to customize things to your organization. And I'll kind of walk through this in a real case too. But first, you just extract your risk. Are we having a conversation about risk? Kind of like that marketing's over here, they have some thoughts, but we're not communicating. How do we communicate that? So when you look at those circles, it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You could say, well, what would have to be true about desirability for this to work? What would have to be true about our customer, about their needs, about their jobs to be done? What would have to be true about willingness to pay or our costs? What would have to be true about our ability to build this and execute on it? We just write those down. We use we believe statements because they're assumptions. I like that framing because it opens you up to the fact that this isn't just a requirement. This is more of a belief. You need to go test that belief. So you can do that from a lot of different things. I'm a little biased for this tool, I guess, out of all the tools. I've seen thousands of these. My co-author created this tool called the Business Model Canvas. And one of the ways we do it is, if you read my book, we've overlaid this thinking on top of that tool. We've said, look, desirability. It's a lot about your customer segment, your value prop. What kind of risk do you have there? Viability, it's a lot about your cost structure and your revenue. Feasibility, it's a lot about your activities and your resources and your partnerships. It's not perfect, but you can start blending this in. And then we say, what would have to be true around this? This is how I've led a lot of companies through their pipeline and sped it up. Because we didn't spend time creating a 5-year business plan right away. I'm not anti-business plan. I'm just saying, understand your business model first, test it, and then create your plan. Because your plan is going to be that much more real if you understand the model and you've tested it. So I think we've got it flipped. Sometimes we say, show me your business plan. Those numbers are completely made up. The inside joke in Silicon Valley is a business plan is something investors ask you to write that they will never read. It's creative fiction in Excel, basically. So understand your model, test it out, what kind of assumptions do you have in your model, and then worry about your plan. So I think we have it kind of flipped. This is how I approach it. Also, if you have a roadmap, a lot of you have roadmaps. You have assumptions in your roadmap. It's a lot of sequenced risk. If this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Well, I have to tell you, but a lot of things are changing right now. And if stuff changes here, it's going to have ripple effects throughout your roadmap. What I see from a lot of my orgs I coach, the roadmap changes pretty much every month. Something else has popped up. We want to go in a different direction. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's what I see inside organizations. So don't treat your roadmap as a series of facts that you just execute on. Yes.
Back up one slide.
Sure.
So if you look at kind of your desirable value proposition, customer tends to start a filter process, right, from an internal perspective, then you validate externally to make sure. Most of the large successes that I've seen is actually you find out that the small projects you may have killed actually may have more relevance to customers than the ones that you believe are truly exceptional and they fail. How do you not pre-filter to kill early?
Yeah. So we love our market sizing, and we love to say, if we only get 1% of this market, that's going to be a problem. We often don't know the true market size until we put in some of the work. So I try to prevent organizations from killing things right away. So the toothpaste thing we were talking about earlier, the team wanted to give up right away on that and say, there's nothing there. I was like, I don't think we have the right acquisition strategy. Let's try again. Because my job as an advisor is not to let you get too depressed or too excited too early. I'm trying to, and you can probably tell my demeanor, I'm trying to like level you out a little bit, you know? So I think Airbnb is a great example. I know it's not necessarily hard work, but there are so many investors that passed on Airbnb. Your market size is not big enough, it's too crowded, you're competing with hotels. They had all these reasons why Airbnb would not work. However, they did not understand that what if your house could be a hotel or your ADU could be a hotel, right? Or your garage apartment. So even when I say you can't pick winners, this is what I'm talking about. So early on, what I caution against is don't try to cut things too early. But give them time. Now you can't give it forever, but if you can define what success looks like and you give it some time, then there's a less likelihood of you killing something that could have been a big success. I'm not saying it's 0%, but you have to give it some time. But I think it's hard because we don't normally work this way in organizations. So if we try something and it kind of flops, we're like, oh, I don't like the way that feels. Let's just stop doing that project altogether. When in reality, it might have needed a couple more months. But I don't want to see it going for 3 years in a customer-free zone. And it keeps going. I call these zombies. I don't know if you use that term. Become zombie projects. They're not alive, but they're not dead, but they keep going on forever. Those are my favorite. So you need a way to kill those for good. So I see that more common than we accidentally killed something that could have been huge. I see more of the case of we have something limping along forever and it's never really going to meaningfully generate revenue, but no one wants to kill it off. Yeah, sure.
This issue of trying to get people to be level-headed about this and not kill things too early is interesting from the standpoint of how do you achieve that in markets where the rate of adoption is unpredictable? And the reference I'm making is think about the dot-com boom. There were so many early ideas there that would have made it had they actually had a more reasonable plan to do it. But everybody wanted something that would go big and scale fast, and they ignored the real rate of consumer adoption, right? And so one of the things that's hard to know, even with a good idea, is what will the actual rate of adoption be? So how do you counsel people on trying to think reasonably about that? Because the idea might be a good one, it just may not go as fast as you think or you want it to go, or your investors want it to go.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many really popular, successful companies today would fail .com ideas, right? Because the infrastructure wasn't there, the market wasn't ready. I think some of that is timing. I do think some of it's timing. You can't control that as much. I mean, you could say, like I do a lot of work with Toyota, and they'll create this amazing thing. But Toyota is a pretty conservative company. And they may not seem that way, but they're very, very conservative. And so they'll find a new amazing thing and they'll like look around. Is GM, is anyone else doing this? No. Let's put this on the shelf and we'll wait. And then when we see more signs, we'll pull it forward when it's ready. So it kind of depends on your company's risk profile. But I do think a lot of it depends on timing as well. It's really hard to predict the future, especially now. But the best you can do is find leading indicators that this is going to work or not. And those are more than just ROI. You can have other indicators. I'll touch on that too.
Market penetration.
Yeah. Okay. So roadmaps, you probably have roadmaps, looking at risk in your roadmaps. There's a lot more AI stuff happening inside the organizations I coach. There's a lot of AI agents. There's also risk in your agents. So I know we've had some other talks on AI over the last couple of days. If you look at AI in general as a trend right now, the way I'm approaching it is have some governance around your internal agent creation process. What are the assumptions in your agents? What success look like? How do we test your agents before approving them? So I'm not saying we're recreating the stage gate process, but I've seen, I was talking to a VP of AI from a health insurance company, and he's like, look, we created these little AI councils now, and agents get routed through those councils before they get approved. So we had to rein it in. We had to put some kind of governance around it. So if you are having AI conversations inside your company, they are not excluded from this conversation. You know, think about what big assumptions, like what problem do they solve and what does success look like? It applies to them as well. Okay. So here's me teaching this at Stanford. I subject students to this when I can, trying to work the younger generation as much as I can. But I do teach this and guest lecturing across different universities as well. All right, so Matt, we got our extracted risk. What do we do with that? Well, we prioritize it. I've tried lots of different things over the years. I've tried stack ranking. It's okay. I've tried dot voting. How many of you have seen dot voting in your company? I call it the dotocracy. It's dots go everywhere. However, be careful with that because your manager comes in and puts the dot before you know it. All the dots are around that. So be careful with that. I didn't want risk prioritization to be a popularity contest. So I helped create this thing called assumptions mapping. It's used by Google. It's used by a bunch of organizations, government as well. The NSA uses this, which I probably can't talk about anything, but they use it as well. But basically, it's a 2x2. We all love our 2x2s. We had a conversation about risk earlier in this week. Here's how I view risk. So I want to know what's important to succeed. So what is the most important to succeed? And then where do you have evidence? I've tried different versions of this tool over the years, probably the last 15 years. I landed on evidence because that is a meaningful conversation. We can say, do we have evidence or not? What does your evidence look like? I would get a lot of powerful leaders in a room and they would say, I just know. And this is like a conversation stopper. And I always wondered, like, how do you know? Is there any evidence behind that and knowing? So my co-author Alex Oswald and I were in the library at Stanford and we were whiteboarding it out, and he's like, why don't you just go with evidence? You know, that's what we're trying to get to. So it's pretty simple, although it's a little tricky to facilitate. We have those three themes: desirable, viable, feasible. We have those assumptions: cross-functional team, what would have to be true for this to work. Not all of those are the riskiest assumption. So which ones are the most important, where we have the least amount of evidence? And what we're looking for is kind of that top right. What are the things where it's really, really important, but we don't have any evidence to support it? So it's a cross-functional conversation. Now, it's interesting what comes out of this conversation is that, you know, where have we been focusing? Sometimes I work with teams, one of the reasons I use this tool is because they are down below that line, just kind of having fun, you know, and they're making this illusion of progress because they're busy, but they're not actually de-risking, they're not addressing the risk. But they look really busy and they're doing lots of stuff. So we think we're making progress, but in reality, we haven't addressed those really big risky assumptions, called leap of faith assumptions, riskiest assumptions. So here's a small case study. It's kind of hardware, software together for B2B. So I met this company called Topology. They basically scan your face through your phone and they make glasses that fit your face. Pretty cool. They tried to sell direct to consumer, completely flopped. They realized retailers love this, especially during COVID when nobody wanted anything touching their face. They did not want to go in for eye exams. And so they kind of changed their strategy. And here's like a high level of their map, right? They're looking for, well, do people actually have this problem? Will retailers pay enough? Will people trust it? Like these are the kind of things that come out when we're writing these down. And I think these conversations are happening separately, or people have these in their head, like this is keeping you up at night, but we need to give space for this conversation inside your organization to address risk. And then we test. This is one of the reasons I wrote my book. There's 44 different experiments in there. There are many more than that. I just had to stop writing at some point or my editor was going to kill me. But basically, find ways to test quickly and cheaply. We call these kind of discovery work. So we go off and we start running tests, but they're linked back to the things that were really important where we didn't have a lot of evidence. That's really the key. We're not running a test and then trying to figure out what we're going to learn from that. We want to pay down our risk. So we always tie it back to what is the riskiest thing, and let's run a test for that. So I know this is kind of small. You'll get these slides. These are also in the book. And then further down the road, we're doing validation experiments where it's more of a value exchange, risk reduction that way, where we're looking at what's the smallest thing we could do with our customer, but it's not just what they say, it's also what they do. Called the say-do gap. I see some of you nodding your head. Like, if you ever talk to a customer and they didn't do what they said they were going to do, of course, that happens all the time. They're not trying to trick you. It's literally some cognitive reasons why that happens. But we're trying to always close that gap. So we're trying to prevent, we talk to a customer, yep, that's validated. Let's go build $1 million thing that we're going to sell. There's so many steps in between that we can use to kind of pay down that risk. So I'll just share a couple stories, and I'll be mindful of time here because I could tell stories for hours. So I work with Toyota. One of the things that we love doing at Toyota. So Toyota doesn't want to be a car company, vehicle company, they want to be a mobility company. So I work with a lot of their risk on that. It's really risky for them to, well, it used to be a loom company. one of the CFO told me, we used to be a loom company, but most people don't know that now. And we want 50, 75 years in the future that people don't remember us being a car company. Thought that was really ambitious, but also pretty interesting. So this is like one of the ways we approach risk. You'll notice there's a lot going on here. Some of you that do VOC work are like, oh, this looks awesome. I want to read these stickies. This is us prototyping before we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an idea. How do we de-risk this? So what we ended up doing is we went out to the gas station owners and we said, what if people could pay just automatically for their gas through their car? What do you think, guys? What do you think the response was, by the way, from gas station owners on this?
They hate it.
Yeah. Why do you think they hated it?
My margins in the store, so they gotta come.
Exactly. There's no reason to go into the store, right? Also, from a consumer behavior point of view, what do you think is a bit odd about this idea. Like, you're going up to a gas station with your car. What do you still need to do?
Get gas in the car.
You have to get out. Yeah. So you have to get out and physically pump. So do you care if your car pays for it automatically? Probably not. Now, there were some cases where women said, look, I don't like going into dimly lit, gas stations with my purse out. Like there's some cases. But they would have spent hundreds of millions of dollars creating this vast infrastructure to support something that the gas station owners did not want, and the actual drivers of the cars may have used once or twice, right? So it was more of a novelty. So we killed it. So I know consultants love to sit up here and talk about all their successes. That was a huge failure, but a good failure. We didn't spend $100 million integrating payment infrastructure and Bluetooth that could connect to what. It was really easy to accidentally pay for someone else's gas, by the way, because it had to know where you were pulling up. It was very interesting. Single feature stuff. So I had the pleasure of talking to people, interviewing someone at Amazon. And do you remember this button? Have you seen this button before, dash button? It got discontinued. What they were testing with this button was Alexa strategy before Alexa came along. It was a button, you press it, and they would order the thing that you just pressed. Sounds awesome. If something Bezos come up in his, call it his puttering time. It's like where before lunch, he would kind of just keep his calendar open and come up with stuff. And I talked to the guy who was actually in charge of making this happen. And at first it was treats, we get some chocolates, and it was Tide. It all looked great until some kid came over and pressed it 10 times. And then you have 10 boxes of Tide show up. So it didn't have a lot of feedback mechanisms into place. But they discontinued it because they were testing away from screen experience, and they realized, oh, people will actually pay away from the screen. And that became Alexa. They didn't start with Alexa right away. They started with these little tests of, can we change behavior? So I have a podcast on this. He's a very awesome guy. His name's Pat. He goes through all the stuff that went wrong and all things went sideways. Like the chocolate would melt before it would get there, or people would be allergic to nuts. It was really a fascinating poster. So when you think about it, it's not about the single tests themselves. It's about you coming up with your own sequences that work for your organization. And they differ per industry. What works B2B hardware is not going to work for B2C software or services. So you need to come up with your own kind of playbook. And that's part of what I do, is I help companies come up with their playbook that works for them to quickly de-risk what you're working on, and you don't have to reimagine everything every time. These are just some sample ones I've kind of just, from highly regulated to B2B hardware, just some of the trends I've seen. It doesn't mean you have to follow these exactly, but you need to kind of create your playbook for you that works for you. So when you come up with this EMT system, it's more of like a decision system you're using to speed up your commercialization process, but at the same time, pay down your risk along the way. So I want to talk about DuPont just because it's a pretty amazing story. It's why I was invited here last year, and we have some updates that I wanted to share with you. So I started working with DuPont in 2022, and I continue to work with Qnity, that is also spin out from DuPont. We have saved $12 million just killing zombie projects at DuPont. $12 million of stuff that it was feasible, but it wasn't desirable. The jobs, gains and gains were kind of weak. And it wasn't viable. They wouldn't pay enough or switch to the new stuff. 12 million. So we ran 35 initiatives, bets, not 250, but 35 across every line of business through this process. Killed 43% of them, cut 40%. I have different language. If I work with sustainability, say we composted or we shelved or we punted or parked, whatever language you want to use, but you're not actively working on that thing anymore. The ones we corrected and we kept going with have made $24 million so far. But we're just basically running them through that process. It's like a repeatable engine for this. We also trained a lot of internal coaches, so that capability lives inside your organization. You're not relying on outside consultants. I think it's really impactful.
Is there a spot where you go in the stage gate where you started, where it like queued up for this process?
So there's a lot of stage 0, stage 1. If you were to ask people at Qnity and DuPont today, you will see that language is permeated across stage gates. Now, later on, it's about de-risking your channels and other things. It's a lot of different kind of risk. It's more about mitigation risk instead of addressing the extreme uncertainty early on. But that language is now permeating the entire organization process. Now, we're not replacing it. It's just like filling in the gaps that you might have where you're not addressing risk soon enough. I know in the intro, so I wrote this intro before the award ceremony. So the teams won an award. I was really excited about that. I was so happy for them. So they just won an industry award for this work at IRI. This is both Unity and DuPont. For like building this culture of experimentation and de-risking, which I'm so happy for them getting recognition that they deserve from all this hard work they've put in. But this is what modern de-risking looks like. It's not your traditional, let's create a business plan, let's start an R&D building it. It looks very different now from the companies I work with. So my call to action to all of you, assumptions exist in all of your brilliant ideas. No matter how brilliant your idea is, it does have assumptions behind it. And they can be extracted, and they can be mapped, and they can be tested. And you can't pick the winners. This is something you have to do and put in the work in a repeatable manner to really see your new growth take off. Most of my clients, they want to see something like 25 to 35% of their revenue come from businesses that didn't exist 5 years ago. And my question to you would be, do you have enough bets to make that happen? And do you have a process that you can't? You just can't pick winners. I've tried, it doesn't work for me either. It doesn't work for investors, it doesn't work for the smartest person in your organization. You have to go through a testing process. Okay. We might have a little bit on our time. Okay, so questions from the group. Hard questions, please. I love hard questions. I did the business modeling for it was at the time my 3rd grade daughter's class. They were the hardest questions I've ever heard. There was no filter. So it won't be as bad as that. Yeah.
If I read the book with the 44, do you think it'd be pretty easy for me to pick out my? Yeah.
It's a good starting place because I didn't get into this in the talk, but every experiment is coded. So it says whether it applies to desirability, viability, or feasibility. And then I have other parameters like cost, setup time, runtime, evidence strength, capabilities. So I spent a year taking all the tests I've seen across my clients and basically categorizing them. So it's definitely a great start because you'll be able to say, oh, I have this kind of risk. What kind of experiments can help me address that beyond doing like interviews and surveys, which all of us kind of know how to do. There's a lot more you can do beyond that. But yeah, it's a great starting point. And it also goes into some of the assumptions mapping work too. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Oh, thanks.
Okay. No, I got a question. If you're doing this, if you're coming into a company, they want to do this.
Yeah.
What's a cohort look like? Like, is it multiple teams? Is it one team?
Lately, it's been more one team.
One team, one idea?
Yeah. So take one high uncertainty, expensive early stage idea that you have, and let's run it through the process and also see how your organization responds to that. But also it provides you real evidence and risk assessment. I'm not really a fan of just teaching case studies. I'd rather work on your real opportunities.
Right, yeah.
So a lot of my companies now are starting with just one, and we'll do 12 weeks and we'll take it through each step. And even with DuPont, it took, I would say, maybe 5 to 7 ideas before we started really finding what worked for them. So again, I'm not dogmatic about this stuff. So we found what worked for them, which we had to reorder things just a little bit, but you can see the results, like it stuck. So I'm more interested in sticking and helping you than following a process.
Yeah, I just wonder about like if you got like 3 or 4 in a box and it's one team, it seems like it would be you could pull three teams in on that.
You can. It varies on what you're up for. Now, what I like with multiple teams is that I've had a lot of situations where they learn from each other.
Yeah.
And then they learn they can actually help each other and maybe they would not have made that connection in the past.
Yeah.
So if you do multiple teams at the same time, which I support it, they sometimes learn from each other along the way where we may have not, encountered them before. Yeah.
On that point, that makes perfect sense to me because we do the sort of same thing. And it seems to me that the multiple team thing would be great for having other people that are more objective in that collaboration process to help sort of call BS on people from time to time,
Yeah, so I I do my own sort of critiquing, but basically what we do is when they share out, they're sharing out to all the teams. So for example, the assumptions map is great. So they'll say, this is the riskiest thing. And then you might have another team go, but what do you consider this? They're like, crap, no, I haven't considered that. Then they write a sticky, So it becomes this interesting, they're not really tearing each other down. It's more of a, what haven't we considered kind of exercise. Yeah.
That's but my question was, I really wanted to ask you about the assumptions map. So just can you talk a little bit about when you get to that point in the process? So that's a matter, there's a lot of opinions there, right? About what's important and not important and whether we do or don't have information. So how do you manage the potential for bias to skew that map in a way that could actually be disastrous later? So I assume that you're involved in it.
Yeah, the way I facilitate, I've learned some of the traps over time. It's also why I've changed the labels over time. It's also not a one-time event thing. It's not we create our map and then we don't revisit it. It usually feeds into like a learning plan or experiment plan or some sort of risk plan that lays out, here are the things we've called out. Here are here's the proof we're seeking. Here are the experiments we're running. Here's what we've learned. So we do have a dashboard that we create inside companies. And then we're revisiting that map to show what has changed. So ideally, your map looks very different, 3 months in than it did at the beginning. So you can see some of that risk move, where you can see new things pop up. I have a pretty good way of facilitating it where I can usually dampen down the bias, but you're not going to get it 100% right the first time. And I think that's something that I culturally maybe didn't prepare myself enough for. So when I'm working with orgs, it's like, oh, I'm putting the sticky here. This has to be right. And it's not going to be right. It's your best guess of your risk today. You're going to learn by going through the process and shape this thing. So I think that's culturally I'm working with leaders on as well to say, this isn't going to be 100% right, and that's okay. But it's hard for people who have been rewarded and incentivized for being right their entire career, from schooling to business to where they are now. So it is a bit of a mindset shift as well. I'm sorry, you had a question earlier. You're wrong. Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask, what's the most challenging project you have ever advised?
The most challenging? Oh, that's easy. So I won't name the company, but I was brought into a product that probably had 10 million customers. And the most popular page, so this was software, the most popular page on the product was how do I cancel? Yeah, that was a tough one to be pulled into. And you know what's interesting? You don't get 10 million customers by accident. You have done something right at some point in the journey to get 10 million customers. You have done something really wrong to have them want to cancel. And then the team, unfortunately, before I got there, the team was like, we should make canceling easier. And therefore, people just churned out even faster. So that was a really challenging one where they just completely failed on the product experience.
Yeah.
But they had a strong value proposition and people wanted to pay. It's just when they got into the actual product, they couldn't realize the value that was promised to them. So that was a really challenging because we had to almost go back. It's really tough when you have 10 million customers to go back to, all right, let's pretend we have one customer and reimagine this thing. Shocker, it did not work out well. But it was super challenging because I was brought into something almost like can you just fix this for us? And I can't just fix you churning through 2 million customers. But we were able to have an honest conversation about the value prop, where things went wrong, but yeah, that one was really, really challenging. I think it's bringing me in at the right time. as well. Like, I would have loved to met that team maybe a year and a half earlier. Yes.
One note you made there is that, because, from, what we've done, or we're using Stages and Gates and Bob Cooper. We call them zombie projects. He calls them wounded.
Wounded, I
Because
like
they're
that
like
too.
wounded animals because they're even more dangerous. So they get, oh, he's wounded, let's. So what we've done though, is really calculating the opportunity cost of not having a clean kill.
Yeah.
The idea that, and I've been to a few where we were, this was a great process, but we just, we just put some numbers together and said, this will never work. And then the president of the company said, we are never going to discuss this project again. It is dead. Don't bring it up. But that was one of the very few clean kills I had witnessed. And then we went and calculated what they were about to invest and how much money they lost, and realized that that decision alone was worth more than anything they could have made if the product made it out the door. So you seem to have done some quantification of this clean kill. I don't think we do that enough. Just the opportunity cost of keeping this wounded project alive has now greatly exceeded anything we could ever make if it turned out to be successful, because it's sucking up resources that could be invested in better things. And the numbers get astronomical very quickly, is what I found in most firms, for keeping the wounded animal alive. It's usually because it's the boss's favorite product or.
Yep. Or when I ask a company, what did that failure cost you? Like, not just in product and wasted inventory, but time you spent developing it and everything. A lot of them have not done the math. I think because maybe they don't really want to know.
Oh, it's painful.
Because you would add up those numbers really quickly. Yeah, I think one of the things I loved, I know some of you know Alexa, because I'm a huge fan. We would celebrate killing things inside DuPont, which I loved. So Dead Projects Day happens on Halloween. Everybody dresses up in costumes. And we talk about all the things that we killed and why they died. And none of them died because they couldn't build them. They died because customers didn't need them or wouldn't pay enough, or things changed. So I love that thing that she kept doing. I was lucky enough to participate in a few of those.
That's great. Day of the Dead.
But like, celebrate, it sounds kind of quirky, but celebrate killing things, celebrate not working on things, and show that no one's getting fired. It's not a career limiting move inside your company. It's something we've actually celebrate because we're not investing in something that wasn't going to work. Yeah.
The Toyota example.
Yeah.
Was that desirability or feasibility?
That was desirability. Feasibility, we could have figured that out. I'm quite honest.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of from feasibility, the channel was blocked. The gas stations weren't.
Oh, I think we could have. That's a good point. I think we probably could have found a way.
We run into a lot of those where it's that everything's great, but somehow there's a channel, usually obstacle, like they ain't gonna do it.
Yeah, and then it becomes can we use a different channel?
Can we go around the, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could have found a way.
No, you can't.
No, it's interesting with that one. And there was a lot of things I tested with Toyota, everything from Amazon drivers delivering packages into your trunk to, your car automatically telling your network when you're going to be late for a meeting because you're stuck in traffic. There's all kinds of very interesting mobility themed stuff. I would say that one, they were really in love with the feasibility of solving the technical problems there. But we also, on that side, we accidentally crashed the payment system of a gas station. So it wasn't like we were pretty early on in the process. We hadn't worked out all the kinks yet, but I think technically it could have worked. And actually, Alexa did something like this. So Amazon did this with Exxon back in the day, where you could talk to Alexa and try to do that. I'm pretty sure that didn't persist either. But when I saw that commercial, like, haha, yeah, I've seen that before. So I think it's these sound all great in the meeting room until we get out and we actually interact with the real world. But we can convince ourselves that's a brilliant idea. It happens all the time inside meetings. So that's why I try to get us out of the building, getting real market feedback. Yeah, we have a few more. And keep me on time, please. Okay.
How has AI changed your process in all of this? Meaning like when you're doing assumption mapping,
Yeah.
how do you keep people from thinking about, oh, other companies are doing, this type of AI work, we should include that in this, but also like, kind of keeping it like within AI still, but then considering other options. Do you know what I mean?
So with AI, it's interesting. I've tried different approaches inside orgs with it.
Yeah.
What I see working at the moment is we will start writing our assumptions. So we still do the 3 themes.
Yeah.
And we have people. And then we have either an agent or prompts that we use to also generate assumptions. And what tends to happen is there's a lot of overlap in them, but there's value in the edges. So there are things the team has written down that AI did not consider. And then there are things that AI created that the team didn't consider. So we tend to take the edges and fill in some of the blind spots that we may have had. With prioritization, the actual map, I haven't had a lot of success because you have to give it so much context and then people argue with the map. So what I've had more success with is we create our map manually and then we ask AI, like I built some agents in Cloud Skills to do this, to critique the map. So I'm very cautious of how I'm integrating AI in the sense of I don't want it to seem like I press a button and it spits out all the stuff I need and then I go build. It's more of a manual than AI. What are the differences? Manual, AI critique this.
Yeah.
And then with the library, I have a JSON library of all my experiments where if you plugged it into AI, it'll recommend what I would recommend based on the library. So I think you can just be really thoughtful about how you use it. I don't think I completely answered the question because it's more
it does,
competitive,
'cause I
but
think,
that's how I'm approaching
within
it.
the process, it hallucinates a lot, right? So
Yeah.
we get things that like aren't necessarily true, or like people want to jump in and believe it right away. So makes sense.
Yeah, I really like the write first and then go to AI, and then it almost makes the team feel kind of like more confident, like, oh, we weren't completely crazy. This is what AI came up with. But then there's some things that you considered like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that one. We should put that in. So I like that flow a little better. If you start with AI first and then write, I haven't seen the same aha moments. It's more of a, oh, let's just take what it spit out. And that's not,
Yeah.
I don't want you to defer too much of your critical thinking to AI.
Yes, and then we have to take a break.
Yes, okay. I'll just go and answer questions forever. So, and I'm available after this.
You've been doing this for a while now, so when you first go through the process, it's gonna take some time to get the behavior and the muscle memory and everything associated with it. As organizations have adopted or done it, do you see where they start to streamline and they have that so it becomes a lot more efficient in the process, or is it always taking kind of step-by-step progress time? Just how do you get faster at it?
So what I've noticed is if you're at this for a couple years, it really starts to compound. So it's not about you following the exact process as much as, oh, you know what? We should do an assumptions map for that because that's what we need here. We need to talk about the risk. I also see if you have coaches, either formally or informally, trained inside your org, that helps because you have people you can pull in that also have the domain knowledge. Really taking a look at your stage gate process and saying, what can we change to better account for these risks? That helps. So it's more of like building the infrastructure into your company. But that does take time. It's not going to happen, in a workshop. But that is what I see speed things up. You have a proficiency inside your org and people that can help each other out. That's what I've seen stick. And I come from work transformation, so I know it's all messy, and I think having those capabilities internally just when people get stuck, you don't want them to not ask for help, and that helps speed it this one. Okay, so if you want to contact with me also beyond the conference, you can just scan that and you'll get on. I think that leads you to an application to get on my calendar. So, but I really appreciate you spending time with me. All great questions, and I'm glad it was more of a conversation than